Hey, everybody. Welcome. Today I'm talking to my new friend, Misty McIntyre. She is a marriage and family therapist, now a coach. She also coaches couples. She is super passionate about relationships. She's working on her ASECT certification to become a certified sex therapist. She's a total relationship nerd. We had our first conversation last week, and I was like, I need to talk to you in front of other people. So I decided to bring her on and have a chat. And I want to talk to you, Misty, today about something that I think is really important to talk about that we don't talk about enough, and that is resentment. So, how many couples show up to talk to you, or individuals show up to talk to you, and they're feeling resentful in their relationships? How often does that happen?
Oh my gosh, all the time. I would say ballpark 90%.
Okay. Where does that
Yeah.
resentment come from?
Well, where they think it comes from or the root.
Let's talk both.
Um, I think for them, the understanding is that resentment is coming from their partner not meeting their needs. And there's this narrative built around they don't care about me, I'm not important, my needs aren't important. They're always worrying about them, they get to do what they want. And specifically, I see it more in people who have been parenting for a couple of years. They've made that transition into parenthood, and there's lots of hats being worn, lots of roles, lots of division of labor, division of responsibility, mental loads, all of these things that suddenly come up. But the story for them is that my needs don't matter, I'm not important, and my partner doesn't care.
Mm.
To me, the root of it is that there is an invitation for boundary work. I don't know that I've yet seen an instance where um, someone was actively seething in resentment and also practicing really good, healthy boundaries and standing toe to toe with their partner.
So, maybe the popular consensus that what I'm hearing you say, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but the common idea is that I'm feeling resentful because my partner's doing something wrong. But in reality, resentment is just a signal that you have boundaries that are being crossed that you either haven't set clearly with your partner or you're not enforcing very well.
100%.
Okay. So I want to step out of some of the boundaries. The word boundaries is a popular word right now, but it's still a little psychobabbly for me. So let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit about what boundaries are and what they look like, and how maybe a violation of those boundaries could cause resentment. Can you give me some examples?
Yeah. So, a simple definition of boundaries is just simply like your rules of engagement in the relationship, right? What's okay and what's not okay, what's acceptable and what's not, what's tolerable and what isn't. And boundaries shift and change over the course of a relationship. They're not always static, right? That as we enter into new seasons of marriage, we suddenly have new things to re-collaborate on. And I say re-collaborate rather than negotiate because that probably means both people are going to walk away a bit unhappy if you're negotiating, that you're giving up something,
Yeah.
right? And I believe in a collaborative partnership, it's really about coming together and being in solution energy with your partner. And maybe that sounds psychobabbly as well, but
No.
being committed to figuring out solutions rather than staying married to the problem, right? Um, what was the question that you asked there at the end again? I want to make sure I touch on that.
Yeah, I want to maybe get some examples of what it looks like to have a boundary be crossed that leads to resentment, and maybe we can have a conversation after that about what it looks like to set clearer boundaries and enforce them, because I think that's also really difficult. But let's start with some examples of maybe people that you've talked to that have a boundary issue and what that looks like.
Sure. So, one that's coming up pretty frequently just because of the people that I work with is um, particularly mothers that are carrying the burden of the mental load. Maybe they're working and they're parenting the children, and they are designated as the primary caregiver. And there wasn't any discussion about it. It just is how it is. And so maybe their partner, usually a heterosexual partner, is able to sort of have this sense of freedom that the mother doesn't. Right? So they can go to work and not pack the lunches, and they don't have to figure out childcare. And when a kid is sick, they're not having to call in from work. Typically, not always the case. But these are examples. So the mother might grow resentful The wife might grow resentful. That what I really wanted is to be able to take care of myself, and you're not letting me do that. And so you're crossing my boundary,
Mm,
right? Another example might look like I don't want to be called a name, and my partner just called me a name and they violated my boundary.
mm.
I don't
And
want you to do that, and you did that. Right? We got to.
I'm in a men's group right now, and there's a lot of men in this group who are really struggling because they're going through faith transitions, and the belief system that they had early on when they got married, it's like it's changing for them, and it's causing a rift in their relationship with their partner, and that can be like a really scary thing. Of hey, you promised that you would like believe the same thing that you believed when we got married. Now you don't believe that anymore. That can be like a scary thing. Um, yeah, there's a lot of different ways to have a boundary or what I guess what's the difference between a boundary and an expectation?
Oh goodness. That's a great question. I think an expectation is often not verbalized. It might be an unclear boundary, but I think an expectation is also something that we're projecting on our partner sometimes based on our own experience and our raising and what we wanted to recreate from our raising or what we want to avoid recreating. Right. So I will never have a partner yell at me. My expectation is here. And then all of a sudden you have an argument and your partner yelled at you. And it's like, whoa, there's a big discrepancy between what I expected in this relationship and what actually just happened.
Mm,
And so I think that gap can invite us to create the boundaries. Um, Expectations is probably a different conversation altogether, though.
no, we
Um,
can have a whole different conversation about expectation. I want to hammer on something that just kind of popped into my mind when you said that. Sounds like expectations is more about um, your partner's behavior and like trying to get them to behave in a certain way to make you happy. But boundaries is more about controlling your own behavior. It's controlling your own response to your partner's behaviors or words. Is that an accurate thing where a boundary kind of because you can't set a boundary? How do I put this? You can set a
nope,
boundary
yeah,
response to somebody else, but it's all about stuff that you can control, and an expectation can be
yeah.
largely stuff that out is outside your control.
That's such a good point because a lot of times when we're making boundaries, it's because we feel some type of way and then we want to control somebody else's behavior. And sometimes the behavior is atrocious or inappropriate, right? But we get really disempowered and then more angry or more anxious or more afraid or more disconnected when we're trying to control them and we're usually in more conflict. It's about getting their behavior to be different.
Mm,
But the boundaries are for me, not against you, which means we have to have them with a strong back and an open heart. And I'm of the belief that sometimes boundaries are to be recampaigned over time. Right? That it's
yeah,
not just this one and done line in the sand, we're never gonna talk about it again, and then you violated it. And then there's so many nonverbal boundaries that it's the expectation, we never talked about it, and then there's a violation, and now we know there was actually a silent boundary there.
yeah. I want to put something you just said on a T-shirt. The boundaries are for me, not against you. I love that. So, what can you talk more about that idea that a boundary is for me, but it's not against you? Because I think sometimes when we're setting a boundary, we tend to feel like this is like like you were saying to control our partner, or when a boundary is being set on us, we might feel like it's an attack or uh, uh, an attempt to control. And so, what does it mean to have a boundary be for me but not against you?
A couple things. One is oftentimes people mistake boundaries for ultimatums. So they're making this big line in the sand expectation in a reactive and triggered state. Right? Where they're really angry or they're really frustrated or they're really sad or they're feeling really insecure. And the ultimatum is to get the partner to choose them so that they can feel better
Mm,
in some type of way. Right? So the ultimatums are happening in this triggered state, whereas a boundary is a way to preserve your own integrity and your core values and to meet your own core needs so that you are this standalone, autonomous individual that knows how to self soothe their own insecurities or anxieties about the relationship, but also that you're doing it in this really loving way that says, I'm not out to get you. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm just taking a stand for myself. And then it means when your partner's upset or pissed off or frustrated that you've just made the boundary, that you give them permission to have their feelings about it rather than collapsing into, oh my gosh, they're mad. So I need to acquiesce and over accommodate and people please so that they're not upset with me.
Wow. That's such a powerful distinction that I've never heard before, that an ultimatum comes from an anxious space and it's about choose me or else. It's it's a
Yeah.
need for validation. It's a need for, hey, I'm putting my partner in the most uncomfortable position that they can be in so that they're forced to choose me so that I can calm myself down and feel more safe in the relationship. And almost inevitably what happens is that it's a temporary fix. It's not a
Yeah.
permanent fix because the anxiety will come back, the fear will come back, the behavior will probably return, and you have to resort to another ultimatum, or you have to resort to like enforcing the ultimatum, which if you're not prepared to do that, can either end the relationship prematurely or put you in an uncomfortable position where you don't have integrity anymore, where you make a threat
Totally.
and it turns into an empty threat. Whereas a boundary, it's not about that. A boundary is about calming myself down, not feeding the anxiety. A boundary is about taking a deep breath, settling in, having some self respect, and giving your partner a choice to show up as their best self without becoming their enemy or giving them idle threats. That's so, that like, that's in my brain for a loop. I'm so glad you shared that.
Well, and one of the ways this might look is if there's a partner that's really unhappy with the relationship and they're thinking about couples counseling, and maybe they've had a big argument and things escalated, and all of a sudden they're like, look, we're going to couples therapy or else.
Mm,
And so the other partner ends up kind of dragging themselves to therapy, dragging their feet. And when there's ultimatums, the issue around that is that now the partner who issued the ultimatum, they don't actually know if their partner is saying yes because it's genuine or if they're saying yes because they're just trying to tell them what they want to hear. So it fuels, like you said, the insecurity or the anxieties or the worry or the uncertainty even more. It
yeah.
doesn't actually serve the person who delivered the ultimatum. So, for
Okay.
example,
Yeah. Go ahead.
you go to couples therapy or else. I'm divorcing you and serving you papers if we don't go. That's an ultimatum because it removes your partner's choice, their free will to discern what actually feels like a good decision for them. But what that looks like if you stand for yourself and you're doing what you need to do for you, not against your partner, which is, honey, I love you. And I would really love for us to get some professional help. And I understand I'm going to ask you to come with me. And if you say no, I'm going to respect your choice. So what I want is professional help, and if you say no, I'm still going to get professional help. And if you say yes, then I really look forward to us being able to do that together authentically. We both said yes to it.
Mm,
And then not getting pissed off and icing them out or giving them the cold shoulder or the silent treatment when they choose not to go.
that's the tricky part.
Mhm.
So, how do we get to this place where I think when we first end up marrying somebody, when you fall in love, we have this mindset of I want to feel empowered, I want you to feel empowered. I feel loved, I want you to feel loved. And we have this kind of this desire to have a mutual bond, mutual connection on this journey. And then how do we get to this place where the person that we supposedly love the most in the world is hurting and they want something to help improve the relationship and make things better. How do we get to this place where it's like, I don't want that. I don't want that for you. It doesn't matter. Your hurt doesn't matter to me anymore.
That's a great question. I don't know if I completely know the answer.
Yeah.
To be honest, I feel like every couple could probably tell you some derivative um, of some answer, but I'd be willing to bet that resentment plays a huge part in that, right? That if I can see that my partner's hurting and I don't want to connect with them in a way that helps them soothe or facilitates our growth, it's probably because there's some kind of contempt bubbling underneath. Right? Where maybe you've not cared for me for a long time, so maybe it feels really good to be indignant about it and for you to finally get a taste of your own medicine.
Mm.
I think it's, as Terry Real calls them, it's one of the losing strategies. If we shut down on it or we retaliate or we get righteously indignant or we want to be right about it, um, we're going to lose every time.
Yeah. What does resentment look like if it goes unchecked in a relationship?
Oh, um, I think it can look. I think it can show up in two different ways and opposite ends of the spectrum. I think it can look like a really angry, irritable, critical partner that's really just kind of coming at you really strong. Um, that complains and maybe attacks you, blames you, and they might be a bit hyperverbal with you at times. But I also think it can start to look like resignation and shutting down and withdrawal and maybe pulling away from sex, pulling away from giving to your partner, sort of living these separate lives, more than just like roommate style, but kind of like strangers sharing a household together.
Yeah. It's like, I've called it a marriage of mutual toleration in the past,
Hmm.
where you just tolerate your partner's presence, but you're not really engaged in or
Yeah.
don't care to engage with them at all. Yeah. No, thank you.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that is that it reinforces this idea that my core values, my core needs don't matter, so I'm not gonna speak up and have a voice about it and articulate myself, and then it breeds more and more resentment. Like, it becomes, sort of this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Very interesting. So, if boundaries are the solution to resentment, to because I'm assuming the longer you let your resentment simmer and fester, the worse, the farther down to these extremes you're going to go. You're going to become more hostile and critical and angry and frustrated and hyper verbal towards your partner, or you're going to become more isolated and withdrawn and neglectful. And so we don't want to keep moving to those extremes. We want to come back and connect with our partner. So let's can we talk a little bit about what some healthy boundary practices look like to get ourselves out of this scary swing to one of these polarizing sides of resentment?
Sure. One of my favorite ways of thinking about it is identifying your core needs, and most people don't really recognize what those are and don't even know how to go about looking for what they are. So I like to think about what is it, and you can try to get a little bit closer if you pay attention to what your triggers are. So if you're noticing that you're really triggered around doing a lot of extra parenting, that might be a clue that you're needing a boundary around what co parenting peacefully in the home and sharing some of those mutual responsibilities might look like. But um, one of my favorite ways of identifying those core needs is to think about if I wasn't even married to my partner, what is the need that I'm trying to fulfill right now? And so, for example, a lot of people might be like, "Oh, it's I want my partner to pick up after themselves, and I want them to be like somewhat respectful. Like, don't be leaving messes for me. And I've got 2 kids to take care of. I don't need a third." Um, and really, if you identify, if my partner wasn't in my life and I was doing this thing solo, what is the thing I'm really looking for? And it might be, "Oh wow, I just want to relax in my home and there be peace."
Mm,
And yeah, I want to enter into a state of relaxation and to be able to have time to decompress and like exhale from the day. And if I'm doing all kinds of stuff, it means I'm not afforded that. So that means this person is really asking for opportunities to self care and have a sense of relaxation and ease in their home. That's a different conversation than can you help do the dishes? Because most
yeah,
people find once their partner is helping doing the dishes, it actually didn't fix anything.
interesting. How many people do you think experience resentment because they have an expectation or a desire for their partner to meet their needs? And then the solution is actually that they realize that there's ways for them to meet their own needs.
Oh, most of them.
Tell me more about that.
Um, I am of the belief that relationships are specifically our marriage is our ashram. That if people are looking to figure out like how do I grow? How do I become more spiritual? How do I heal? How do I be the best version of myself? How do I be a great parent? How do I be a great lover? If you really want to know the answer, take a look at your marriage because all of the things that trigger you about your partner is a direct reflection back to all the stuff that's actually activated in you. So, for example, if you recognize that your partner is critical of you and you're really annoyed by their critical tone and their constant attacks on you, It may very well be that your partner is critical. However, the question becomes, where in my life am I critical? Am I critical of myself? Am I critical of others? Am I critical of my coworker? Am I critical of my mother-in-law? And that's the stuff we are being invited to clean up and clear out. So really, connection to our partner is about being so deeply and intimately connected with ourselves that everything that we see in our partner becomes our invitation to grow, our invitation to heal, our invitation to bring out the best parts of ourselves to show up in worst case scenarios. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. Totally does. I love that. So that was kind of a segue. You were talking about setting some clear boundaries, and I love that our first step here is finding like what is the actual problem that what's the
Yeah.
thing that's aggravating you. You know, getting specific with is it really that I want a clean kitchen, or is it more that I want to feel at peace in my house? Is it really that I want
Yeah.
to feel like calm and relaxed? Is it really that my partner won't initiate sex? Or is it really that I just feel disconnected and I want to feel close to my partner again and not like we're estranged? Is it really a timeliness thing? Like I'm sick of my partner being late all the time, or is it more I want to feel like I can count on you to show up for me and be that you'll be there when I really need you most? And
Mhm.
yeah, it's looking for the what I can't remember if it was Sue Johnson or John Gottman that said underneath every complaint is a deep internal longing or a desire for connection. And I think sometimes
Yep.
the thing on the surface that we're really frustrated about is a symbol of something else that's much deeper underneath that we're not getting.
Yeah. Sue Johnson. I think they both say the similar thing in different ways, different
Yep.
language, but Sue Johnson is all about every criticism and every conflict is a protest against disconnection.
Yes.
Right. But so, yeah, that first step is identify your own core need.
Great.
And it's not uncommon to have people say, I don't know. Beautiful. If you don't know, that's sort of an aha moment.
Invitation to go figure it out.
Yeah. Which means you're not very connected to yourself. If you don't even know what you want, what you need, how to get there, what it feels like in your body, what it feels like emotionally, then that's a lot of time to really deeply connect with yourself so that you can connect with your partner and invite them into whatever that looks like for you. So, identifying your needs. And then there's a two circle method. So, once you identify your core need and you can invite hopefully have a conversation with your partner about what is their core need because maybe your partner doesn't want to do the dishes because they also want to come home and relax without being griped at, complained at, dumped on, attacked, right? So let's say both of them all of a sudden have this core need to relax in their home. Wow. Like now you're both working in the same direction as opposed to being in gridlock with each other.
Mm,
So if you identify your core need, your partner's core need, sometimes they're different and sometimes they're opposing and conflicting. The conversation then becomes about how do I wiggle just a little bit so that it's easier for me to get my core need met. That might mean I have to help you out a little bit. So, yeah, maybe you'll do the dishes, but maybe I'm also giving the kids a bath while you're doing that so that then we can both relax faster, right? Rather than feeding into the thoughts of, well, here I am, you're going to do the dishes, and I'm still over here doing this parenting stuff, giving the baths. It's not really helpful at all,
yeah. Yeah.
right? So, being able to have this collaborative discussion where, okay, if this is what I need and this is what you need, how do we work together to make sure that both of us are getting our needs met? Because your needs are important to me. And when you can start to mirror that in the relationship, your partner's also going to want to take care of your needs.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting because let's stick with this story of I want to be able to relax in my house. I want to be able to sit down and just like breathe and unwind after a long and stressful day. Maybe you can do that after you've done the dishes. But if you've done the dishes full of resentment, you bring that into your clean house and now you sit there and instead of relaxing, you're stewing and you're mulling and you're ruminating on all of your partner's the frustrations in your relationship and your partner's weaknesses and the things that they do to make you frustrated and you can't be at peace in your house. But just changing the context a little bit of, hey, if my partner's upstairs giving the kids a bath or helping me get to that relaxation phase sooner, Or it could be another solution. You could say, how about we just always do the dishes together? It takes half the time. We could turn on our favorite playlist and make it a fun thing instead of something that both of us hate. Just switching the context. The same task is still getting done. But when you finish the task, you're not carrying the resentment into your clean home now. So,
Yeah, I mean, doesn't that open a window of creativity? Like,
yeah.
now we're playing and creating and connecting together for something that's pretty monotonous
Mhm.
and cumbersome that we both hate.
Yeah. So we identify the problem and the need more specifically. And then we start thinking about creative ways to meet that need that don't involve the same patterns that have not worked in the past. Um,
Yes.
okay, talk to me more about boundaries. So we've kind of brainstormed and been creative about how to meet these needs. What's next?
Well, then there's the follow through piece, right? And something simple like, hey, from now on we do the dishes together. Um, I think that it requires us to recognize that when you say it one time, it doesn't always mean forever. And maybe the hope is that you only have to say it one time, but I think that's an unrealistic expectation that you say it one time and then you're done. Right? We when we're parenting our children, we don't tell them one time when they're 2, "Hey, you can't hit your brother," and then expect them to like never do it again. We're recampaigning. Remember, we don't hit. Remember, you can't hit your brother when you're angry. We redirect, we move them. It happens over and over and over again. Now, I think a lot of adults are like, yeah, but my partner isn't a child and, they're not 2 years old and I'm not their
Yeah.
mother.
I've heard the term a lot lately of weaponized incompetence.
Oh, yeah. I think TikTok blew that one up.
Yeah, tell me, like, this feels like it falls into that conversation a little bit.
Well, for anyone that says, like, my spouse is not a child and I don't expect them to act like one, then that's going to mean you have to stop acting like their parent.
Mm, mm, mm. Yes. Okay. Tell me more
So that,
about that.
yeah. So a lot of times it looks really helpful. Right, Laura Doyle is the queen of this
I
part of the
love
conversation,
Florida.
right?
Yeah.
That we get into these kind of controlling, micromanaging behaviors when we feel some type of way where it's like, "Hey, shouldn't you get a haircut? You're gonna wear that shirt? Did you tell your boss that you were needing that promotion? Hey, you said you were gonna, like, get the kids' pajamas packed for vacation. Did you do it?" Like, the more that we're, like, sweeping in to be helpful is the more that we're also sweeping into that parenting mode.
Yeah.
And so, if you really want to get out of that, it means that you have to give your partner permission to be the adult, which means they have free will and they get to do stuff on their own time. Because the moment that you have some belief that they are not entitled to their own thoughts or feelings or behaviors, you are going to be placing shoulds on them. They
Mm,
should do this, they shouldn't do that, they should do it sooner, they should stop acting that way, they should act a little nicer, they should get a haircut more often, they really should manscape better, like, they should care more, whatever, all of these shoulds, which guess what? Fuels expectation. So now there's this story and this narrative about what they should be doing, and then we're left with the reality of what is, and it looks really disenchanting.
yeah. Uh,
And most people don't know how to marinate in that, okay, this is where it is. It's like, no, 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 we can't have that. So let's go and change them. Let's get them to be different. Let's go micromanage and control and um try to parent them. And then I'm just gonna resent the fact that they act like a child.
yes. There's a book called Everything Isn't Terrible by Dr. Kathleen Smith. It's my favorite book of 2020, I believe. And one of the things that she talks about in that book is this tendency that we have when we're feeling anxious about our relationship to what she calls overfunction. And
Mhm.
what I realized that this is this temptation that we have to parent our partner, to step in and be helpful, or to micromanage them, or to give little helpful suggestions and try and influence them to do the thing that we want them to do, is really a way of managing our own anxiety, because we have a way in our head that things should be done, and we have a version of our relationship in our head of what we want it to look like in reality. And if we're anxious or nervous about our relationship or our partner not showing up the way that we expect them to, then we try to control them and manipulate them so that they do the thing that we want. It's the same thing that a parent does for a child who's maybe failing a class and they're worried about them getting into college. So they help them do their homework. Maybe they do it for them. And when their child's forgetful, they bring their homework to school and, they're packing everybody's lunches and they're making sure that everybody's taking their medications. And at the beginning of all of this, it feels really good because I'm needed. I'm like the linchpin of the family. I'm the person that everybody relies on to get things done. If I wasn't here, everybody's lives would descend into chaos. And it feels good to be the hero. But after a while, people start taking you for granted. And then it leads to what we talked about, what this whole conversation has been about is resentment. It's like nobody appreciates me, nobody else pulls their weight. And we don't realize that it's because, in large part, we have trained our partners to not take responsibility for the things that they're responsible for. My I am
Yeah.
I'm a classic overfunctioner. I remember I haven't told this story many times, but when I was before I got married to my wife, I was actually engaged to another woman and she really struggled with anxiety. And I was like anxious about her anxiety because when she got anxious, she withdrew. And when she withdrew, I was scared that the relationship would end and that we wouldn't end up getting married, which obviously ended up not happening. Um, so my anxious fears were true. But one of the things that I did when things were getting kind of rough is I was like, look, I think that anxiety is largely to blame for our relationship struggles. And I know what to do when somebody's feeling anxious. There's lots of things that we can do to help make you feel better. We can make sure that you're on a consistent sleep schedule, that you're getting a solid 8 hours a night. We can make sure that you're exercising. We can make sure that you're eating right. And I started waking up at like 5:30 in the morning and driving to her house so I could be there by 6 so we could work out together. And then I would make her a nice healthy breakfast and make sure she had like a healthy lunch. And then we would hang out later that night when we were done with work. And I'd make sure that I left on time so that she could go to bed early enough that she could get her 8 hours of sleep. And I started micromanaging aspects of her life that were not my responsibility. And what I realized is that it made the problem worse because now she was anxious about like letting me down or not being in the mood to work out or eating a cookie while she was at work or after I left going to bed 2 hours later because she was watching a video or doing something. Then she felt guilty and ashamed and started hiding things from me. And, her anxiety went up and then my anxiety went up and it made everything worse. And I got to a point where I realized like I I have to learn what the boundaries are. I have to learn what I am in control of and what's in her side of the fence, what she's in control of, and I can't like step over that line and try and take care of stuff or it makes things worse and vice versa. Like I can't make her responsible for stuff on my side of the line for calming me down. So
Yeah.
long story, but I feel like parenting your partner, it's easy to take the noble one up position and say, well, I just want what's best for our life and for our relationship. And we don't realize how damaging it can really be.
Yeah, that martyrdom, which a lot of times we're taught to be the martyr. It's our template for love, right? I will sweep in and do everything for you.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it helps facilitate that weaponized and confidence you were talking about. And then we're resentful when we're the martyr. I had someone recently that said, and this was a great example. She was like, um, you know, I just really need some time away from the kids. Like I need my partner to step in and like help with the kids, especially when I'm like really worked up. I just need some time to like go and cool off, like go for a walk, go for a run, go for a drive, something to self-soothe. I need space to self-soothe. And we are like, so okay, well, can you ask for that? She's like, oh no, because my husband can't handle the kids alone. He says it's too aggravating. And, so, like, she's not even giving her time self space and time to self-soothe because he says the kids are too aggravating. So, well, what would happen if you were to leave the kids with him? She was like, "Oh, he would be really upset when I got back, and, the kids would probably cry." We're like, "Okay, we might need to try that." You know? And her worry was that he's gonna be upset, and that's okay, that he's allowed to have his feelings around it, and
Yeah.
um, you mentioned something earlier, and it reminded me of the saying that, and I can't remember who coined it, but, that our partners are not an extension of us. And we didn't sign up to this thing called marriage to marry ourselves. most of us are wildly insecure and have triggers and wounds and stuff that we're probably wanting to hide, not
Mm.
like be married to. We want to get rid of it, not be married to it necessarily. And if we don't give our partners the space and the permission to be their own autonomous selves, which sometimes, guess what, doesn't coordinate very well with our expectation of how it should go, then we are probably going to set ourselves up for resentment.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And even just going back to this example of I can't leave my partner with the kids because they'll get upset and frustrated and the kids are too much for them. It's like, well, how will your partner learn to be more resilient if they don't ever interact with the kids on their own? Maybe this is a way for them to stop taking you for granted and appreciate all the work that you do when you are with the kids alone all the time.
Hmm.
So there's like so many lessons wrapped up in this. And if you, how do I put this? I think in most marriages, most partners in a healthy, happy marriage are willing to undergo some discomfort so that their partner can get their needs and desires met. And yeah,
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of the other piece of boundary work too, right? Is that with the follow through, that there's not necessarily consequences. I've used the word before, but it's not my favorite word because I think it sounds punitive. Like you're going to
yeah,
punish your partner when they don't do something right. And I like the phrase natural outcomes better.
yeah,
Like, what is the natural outcome when you leave your partner with the kids while you go for a run? Well, the natural outcome is he wants to pull his hair out and he's really frustrated because he recognizes that he doesn't know how to soothe them and he doesn't know what favorite cup they're talking about and he has no clue where the pajamas are. Well, he will figure it out by trial and error, right? And that's a natural outcome. Um, I can remember, shortly after I had our first child, I was going away, for several days, for a work trip and was feeling a little anxious about being away. And, I was a nursing mom and, baby was little. And so I decided that I would make this itinerary that was perfectly mapped out about everything everyone keeping my child needed to know, um, including my husband. That is, here's where the diapers are, here's where the onesies are. If those don't fit good, here's another set. At 9:15, this will happen. At 11:20, this might happen. And I'm kind of embarrassed to say it now, but I can remember making the list and being like, this is total BS. Why? Like, they should just know this. Um, and I made the list, I got back, and nobody followed the itinerary. And, the schedule was all whacked out or whatever, but, nobody followed the itinerary, and I can remember feeling like, "Why did I go through all that work and effort for them to just to not appreciate that?" And the truth is that everyone that my child stayed with was either a parent or a grandparent, which meant it wasn't their first rodeo. They have the skill set to figure it out, and they also have the ability to call me if they need some assistance, and I'm available for that.
yeah,
And it was a big realization for me that I needed to take these 2 hands and learn how to sit on them
yeah,
and quit meddling in other people's business and way of doing things, even if it's not my way.
yeah,
And part of the story that was coming up for me is like, well, what if my husband's up in the middle of the night and he doesn't know where the diapers are? Well, then he'll look for the diapers, or now he'll know where they are. And I don't mean that in a, take that sucker kind of way, but um, that's the natural outcome is that he'll feel frustrated when he can't find the diapers.
yeah.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's
I
yeah, it's
also feel
okay if he feels
frustrated
frustrated.
sometimes.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so
So no more itineraries for me.
good. I think that's a good strategy. Uh, have we checked all the boxes for boundary setting here? We've identified a need. We've collaborated and brainstormed really great alternatives. We have, what was the third thing we just talked about? I'm trying to
Following through.
follow through. Yep. And the follow through happens over time. Like it's not a one and done situation. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Like maybe we can talk just briefly about what happens when a boundary gets crossed down the road. So you've made an agreement, you've got the follow through. You feel like you've creatively come up with a solution. Let's stick with this wanting to have a peaceful house and finding a creative solution to do the dishes and get the kitchen clean. So you come up with a creative solution. Let's say, just for the sake of ease, the creative solution is we're just going to do the dishes every night together. So we do it for a week, super easy. Everything's great. It takes much less time. We feel like it's a team effort and it's not falling on the shoulders of one person. And then after that week, things start to taper off and one partner starts to kind of go to the bathroom for 10 minutes and scroll on their phone instead of helping out with the kitchen or something like that. What do we do when that boundary or the agreement that we've made with our partner starts to disintegrate?
Well, I think there's two things. So one is most people aren't having the discussion of, hey, how do we hold ourselves accountable? What is going to be the first sign that we're not sticking to this anymore? And what are we going to do about it? Right. And
Yeah.
then the other piece is, let's say that you didn't do that and you're like, okay, spending 15 minutes in the bathroom, or she's like, working on her um, Instagram reels for half an hour and not helping me with the dishes. Part of it is being clear and assertive with your partner in real time, right? Is, hey, you're in the bathroom, you're going to finish up soon. Let's really get back to this thing that we agreed upon. Asking your partner to re engage with you because it's what you guys agreed to. But part of what happens is people kind of stay silent, or they start to have, again, this expectation that you shouldn't spend 10 minutes in the bathroom.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to do that. That's not okay. But I think this is where communication is so important too, where it's like, "Hey, I'm gonna be in the bathroom for 10 minutes. Like, I just need to, like, decompress for a few minutes before we hop into the dishes." This is where, again, we're revisiting those core needs. Like, yes, I do wanna relax in my home. I also just walked in the door. Like, and I need 10 minutes just to, like, transition from work to home, or to transition from gym workout to parenting, or to transition from dinner cleanup to, this task that we're doing here. Just give me 10 minutes. I would really be appreciative of that. I think that's so important. But let's say that it's happening over and over and over again, and like the agreement's not being held. I think early intervention is a big key. But afterwards, it's bringing it up to your partner in a way that is loving, right? That is mature and responsible. You can be angry about it, but responsible anger looks very different than indignant anger or violent anger. Um, and saying, this was the agreement that we made, and what are you going to do about it?
Mm.
Because without doing that, you're not giving your partner a chance to, how are you going to handle that? What are we going to do about this? You're not giving them an opportunity to problem solve. You're not giving them an opportunity to win in the scenario. If it's just simply, you're a jerk, you didn't follow through with your promise, and now I can't trust you, and I'm never going to ask you to do anything for me again. It hurts your partner, it hurts you, and therefore the relationship is hurt too.
Yeah. I love where this conversation has taken us because we've gone from being resentful, angry partners who are being driven to one of these extremes of completely withdrawing and shutting down, or becoming like the angry, nagging, passive aggressive, critical partner that none of us wants to be on either of those extremes. And we've figured out where that resentment comes from, which is a boundary's been crossed or an uncommunicated expectation has gone unmet. And now we have a process we can go through, things that we can do to set clear boundaries and to reestablish a sense of fairness, to prioritize our own needs, to take care of ourselves and create agreements in our relationship that feel equitable and communicate with love and respect. Like that's, I think, what at the end of the day, what we all want. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think there's a final piece to this,
Yeah.
which is, if you feel like your partner is not honoring their word or holding their promises, they're not following through, then if relationships are a mirror and they're reflecting back to you the parts of yourself that you can't see, then the question becomes, where are you self-betraying? Where are you not following through? Where are you not honoring your commitments?
Mm.
And it might be as simple as, I said I was going to go to the gym today, but I procrastinated and I said maybe tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or I said I was going to stop smoking, but I didn't. I
Yeah.
promised I was going to get on that diet and I didn't. I swore that I wasn't going to text my affair partner and I did. Um, I, I said I was going to get in the bed early and I didn't. So if you really want to honor boundaries and commitments, make sure that you are self-honoring and you're not self-betraying. This is why so much marriage work is
Yeah.
about how we show up in life. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's inward.
I promised, even something as simple as I promised I would never let myself be spoken to in that way again. Like if
Yeah.
my partner got angry at me, I would say, "Hey, stand up for myself. And if I'm not going to let you talk to me that way, or you're going to leave. One of us is going to leave." Um, it's interesting how doing this work makes you realize the ways in which you are complicit in creating an atmosphere or some sort of dynamic that creates the relationship that you don't want or don't like. I,
Ooh,
I would never. I would. There's a gray area here between um, you are responsible for your choices and your partner's responsible for theirs. They're responsible for their words, their actions, their thoughts, their feelings, just like you're responsible for yours. And so I would never want to say that in a case where your partner's taking advantage of you or harming you or treating you poorly, that it's your fault. And just like they're responsible for their actions, there are moments where you're responsible for not standing up for yourself, for not being assertive, for not speaking up, for not saying this isn't okay. And I think in every relationship dynamic, especially the unhealthy ones, we all share some responsibility, even if even if your piece of the pie is just being complicit and allowing the negative behavior to continue.
yeah, I agree with that. And that's a hard truth to hear sometimes,
Yeah.
right? Like it's like, ooh, like no way, no way. But I see it quite often. And even there are times where strategies and solutions, like for example, somebody might be listening to this podcast and they're like, yeah, but that won't work for me. Yeah, but I've tried that. Yeah, but they make it sound simple. It's not that easy. And obviously we're not knee deep in couples work with someone with a live example. We're giving a framework for people to practice and to stumble and bumble their way through. But at the end of the day, if you're someone that's saying, yeah, but I've tried everything, start paying attention to how much you are arguing for your own limitations.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, that's a heavy
and
comment.
then getting Yeah, and then getting really clear on what it is that you actually want. So if I want a marriage that is um, you know, fiercely intimate and passionate and loving and respectful and kind. And I'm also arguing for the limitations as to why it can't be that way. I mean, you're gonna be you're not ever going to be moving forward in the direction that you're trying to go. So you're gonna sabotage any progress that you can make.
Mm. Marriage is the ultimate human growth machine. This is like that's a truth
Absolutely.
from Misty McIntyre. Is that was big. I like that. Don't argue for your own limitations or fight for your own limitations. That's a really tempting thing to do, I think, in a lot of cases. Well, wonderful. Is there anything else that you want to share about boundaries before we wrap up our conversation?
No, I think I feel
Or
complete with that.
resentment?
I feel complete. Anything else for you?
No, this is just a joy talking to you. If
Yeah,
anybody
same.
wanted to learn more about you or what you're up to, where would you recommend they go find you?
Yeah, so there is a free Facebook group called The Connected Couple. There's lots of things that happen inside that group, and there's tons of backlog videos and Q&As that you can access for free. You can also chime in and get peer support. And you can also go to the website www.therapycocounseling.com.
Big thank you to Misty once again for joining us for this week's episode. Definitely go check out the Connected Couple Facebook group. It's an awesome resource, especially if you really enjoyed listening to this interview with Misty this week. Going forward, I'm going to start publishing interviews here on the weekends. So if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss next weekend's interview. Thanks for tuning in and investing in your relationship. And if anybody hasn't told you this week, you're amazing.